All right, welcome everybody. Happy Wednesday. Happy Inauguration Day. My name is Michelle Benjamin. I'm the Senior Director of Marketing at AUDIENCEX. We're going to give everybody a few minutes to join because we have quite a few registrations and it might take a couple minutes to let everybody in. But today we are here to talk about the Great Cookie Countdown, as you know. Before we get started, I'll start with a couple housekeeping items, which I will repeat at the end because these are some of our most frequently asked questions. Number one, we are recording this, and number two, we will be sending it out to you later today. So it doesn't matter if you're not here and not listening to that now, but if you wanted to pass it along or need something else, need to revisit it, that will be coming your way. If you would like a copy of the actual slides, we can also talk to you about that. No problem. So that's the housekeeping. If you have any questions at any point, we've got two options. You can either use the chat box or the Q&A. Feel free to send those questions over and we will address them at the end. And I think that's pretty much all the housekeeping items. I will introduce our speaker, Danielle. Danielle Gale is our Director of Strategy. She leads the team, the strategic team that builds out cross-channel media plans for brands across the world. So she's got some great experience having lived in Singapore and London previously, working with brands across every vertical. And so she's very familiar with programmatic advertising and how we are all going to be impacted by the cookie going away. So Danielle, welcome.
Thank you. So great to be here and kind of sharing our knowledge. Just wanted to also give a quick update too about AUDIENCEX for those of you joining and who may not know who we are. So we are one of the largest independent trade desks for both clients direct and agencies. And we handle all the media planning and buying for our clients across key channels, including programmatic, as well as OTT, CTV, and then search and paid social. So for those who just joined us, great to meet you. And yeah, as Michelle said, I'm the strategy director here, and I help the team with kind of insights and learnings, and then help our clients too with their media plan and focus. So I think we're still a bit early, Michelle, is that right? So we'll give a few more minutes for everyone else to join. So just stick with us while we wait.
Yep, I still see some attendees trickling in, so let's give it a minute.
Great.
Yep. In the meantime, I'd love to know if you have any favorite presidential pets that you'd like to talk about, because my kids and I just watched the inauguration for children's special, and we learned all about raccoons on leashes and alligators in bathtubs and just insane animals that I am surprised no one has recently.
I know, that is so bizarre, but you said these animals were definitely from like one of the first presidents. So I found the alligators fascinating. I just had a friend move to Florida and she continues to see all these watch out for alligator signs, which is obviously so new to her because she's from California and doesn't have to deal with that. But hearing that there was one in the White House, I mean, that is crazy, but also really cool at the same time. Yeah. I'm
It
also,
is bizarre. Thomas
yeah.
Jefferson apparently had grizzly bear cubs, so there's
Oh,
just
wow.
never ends.
Never ends. Cool. Well, I don't have any pets, but it definitely makes me inclined to want to get a dog.
Yes. All right, 11:04, 11:05, there we go, on the dot, 5 minutes. If you're joining us now, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Great Cookie Countdown with Danielle Gale. Here we go, I'm passing it over to you, Miss.
Perfect. Thank you everyone for joining. So we don't have an agenda for today. We're just going to talk about it, but we really wanted to share a preface. So you are obviously all here today, probably to hear and learn about Google Chrome's deprecation of the third-party cookie. But before we dive into that, really what we're going to be speaking about today is kind of the evolution of policy around kind of data and security for consumers. So not just Google Chrome's policy, but there's been over the last 4 years, many browsers coming up with similar infrastructures. And then we're going to also take you through of just how third-party cookies kind of empower the internet today, why we use them. Are they the great foundation for advertising? Yes or no? And then we're going to go through the policy and the changes and kind of what's impacting those changes and causing those changes. And then, of course, I'm sure as you guys all are here joining for, what can you do today to kind of quickly act and prepare for the 2022 deprecation of the third-party cookies. So before we dive into all of that, we really want to set the stage that this is just the beginning. And currently, there are no proven solutions for the open marketplace at this time. So whether you're an expert in this space or just learning about cookie deprecations, it's okay, because currently there isn't a solution today that we could activate. The one thing we really want you to take away from this entire presentation is for you guys to become adaptable. So really, marketers are going to need to lean in and adapt new methods and test new strategies before they really feel and figure out the impact of the cookie deprecation. And then overall, I think what's the most positive thing about today is that really the infrastructure created today is really going to represent new opportunity for better advertising, better ads with more privacy and security for consumers. Because at the end of the day, we really have to put the consumers at the heart of all of our advertising. And really, this is a solution for them to better secure their privacy. So let's get started. You might be wondering, what in the world is a cookie? So really, in short, a cookie is a small piece of data that is stored on a user's computer by the web browser while that user is viewing a website. And really today, there are two different types of cookies. The first is first-party cookies. So these are stored and set by a website that a user is currently viewing directly. And really what this does is that it allows site owners to collect consumer analytics data to really provide them a good user experience. So for example, this might be an ESPN cookie. So if you are an avid golf fan, when you log into ESPN, you then might be served highlighted news about Tiger Woods. Versus, let's say you're an avid football fan and your favorite team is the Denver Broncos. When you go onto ESPN, you actually might get an article about the new GM that they hired. So really, that's kind of what ESPN is doing. They're actually taking user data, which they own and collect because it's their first-party data, and they're showing a user a really unique and good user experience. On the other hand, we have third-party cookies. So these are really created and set by third parties other than the actual website that the user is viewing directly. So third-party cookies today are leveraged to use cross-site tracking, retargeting, and also ad serving. An example of this could be an ad form cookie. So some of you might use ad form as your ad server, and you'll use them to kind of run a campaign and track that whole user journey on how impressions are being served, who are clicking on your ads, and who are going to your site. So at the heart of deprecation, it's really only the third-party cookies. So don't worry about first-party cookies, we'll still have them in the future, but really at the heart of the deprecation and the deletion is third-party cookies. So what does that mean and how do these third-party cookies enable advertising today? Really, there are three main buckets that we like to focus on for third-party cookies. The first is personalization, second, audience targeting, and third, tracking and measurement, which is really important. So as you all know, I'm sure you guys know personalization. So this is using data to recognize consumers and serve them the right experience. Kind of what we also talked about the ESPN example. A lot of auto brands use personalization to kind of show users the right make and model of cars. We might want to show a family an SUV vehicle versus a car enthusiast a sports vehicle ad. So really the use of personalization is really important and it's powered by third-party cookies. The next example is audience targeting. So, if you want to reach a specific audience, an audience could then be transformed into a list of third-party cookies, which then could be used to identify the users we want to reach on the open web. A good example of this is, say you're a credit card company or a quick day loan company, and you really want to find users that have, a lower than average credit score rating. You might work with Experian to track all the users in the audiences that, let's say, have a credit score of 600 or 650 less. We could actually take that audience from Experian, translate them to third-party cookies, and actually identify those specific users online and show them the relevant ad. And then, of course, the most probably important thing about third-party cookies is that they enable us to track and measure our ads. So really determining the impact of serving an ad to an individual is really empowered by third-party cookies. So we will be able to track a user who's seen an ad, click on an ad, and then gone to an advertiser's website. So this is super important, especially if a marketer has a KPI of, let's say, form fills, or signups to a webinar, or even things like sales and purchases. We want to be able to track that entire user journey to see where we can maybe remarket them in the future. So this is how kind of cookies, enable advertising today. But is that the most greatest foundation? Here at AUDIENCEX, we kind of argue they're not necessarily the best use for targeting users online. I mean, the first thing we got to be honest about is that they're not transparent. So consumers have little insight and control over how and what data is being shared about them. They're also not people-based. So cookies actually represent devices such as a PC, laptop, or a cell phone. They do not represent a person, and this causes a lot of duplication and wasted ad impressions. They're also not persistent, so they're not long-lasting, and they're always subject to deletion by the actual browser or individual user itself. So if you're a marketer and you have a full list of first-party cookies or third-party audiences that you leverage, it's not a guarantee that that's your audience for the year forward or 2 years forward, because they're continually being deleted and new cookies are always entering in the open web. They're also not common. So really, for popular marketing channels like in-app or connected TV, they don't even support cookies. So really, cookies only exist in a web environment, but they're not supported on other great marketing channels. So really, you can't use cross-channel tracking with third-party cookies because some channels just don't support them. So that's great. We know about cookies. We know they're maybe not the best, and we do understand how they power the internet. But really, what is happening today, and why are we seeing this shift of user privacy? And it's not just Google Chrome and their announcement. It's a whole slew of policies that have been happening over the years. And really, we're going to dive into this, but I want you to remember there are two kind of main driving factors for this shift towards user privacy. The first one is consumer preference, and the second is the actual government's policies and companies kind of leading this change. So we all have to be honest here. Consumers actually do not want personalized ads. And in fact, Nielsen did a recent study where they found 57% of US consumers said they would shrink ad personalization in favor for protecting their online data. The study also revealed that 39% of global consumers felt that they were informed by the way marketers acquired and used their data. And then 63% said that brands were the biggest benefactors of their data and not the consumers themselves. So what happens with this? Really, some things we're also seeing is kind of the rise of ad blocking. Users do not want their data being shared, so they're installing ad blocking where they could protect their own cookies and their data. Of course, this is kind of year over year decreased over time, but it's because policy has come into effect. But still today, over 27% of all internet users have a form of internet blocking, which is huge, and it's a big problem. And I have to pause there and kind of tell a story, which I'm sure you guys experience too. We have to be careful with personalized ads, and I think the technology today is getting so good, it's almost becoming intrusive. So over the holiday weekend and the long weekend, I was with some family, and my sister just mentioned, speaking of pets, Michelle, earlier, she just got a new dog. a little puppy that is wild, untrained, needs a lot of help. So we were talking with our family about specific trainers, what to do, how we could help. And of course, during this user journey, being with my family, I'm of course using my phone, going onto social media, browsing. And when I log into Instagram, the first ad I get is a masterclass ad for pet training. Of course, in that moment, do I think, wow, this is a relevant ad because I'm just having this experience with my sister? No. We immediately run to Alexa, turn off the microphones, I shut down my phone and hide it in my room. Ads are becoming way too personal. It's intrusive. It's almost like surveillance. I'm sure you've all had your own similar types of experiences, but it's something that we need to balance, especially going forward as the data gets richer. And really, governments and even companies are kind of taking this into account and really creating action. Apple actually was the first to kind of announce that they're going to protect users and secure their data. So early in 2017, Apple Safari launched the ITP 1.0. This means third-party cookies will be cleared every 24 hours. What does this mean for marketers at that time? It meant that we had 24 hours to actually get that user data and kind of track them for their journey. So something we had to do to immediately react is we had to set attribution windows into a 24-hour time period instead of like the 30-day or kind of 7-day view. So it really impacted our attribution and the way we optimize campaigns. Then in 2018, GDPR announced that they were going to allow anyone in the EU to be able to track, collect, and own their data. And as such, any website one of these users were browsing, they actually had to opt in to sharing their cookies and being tracked. This is really interesting because we actually ran a campaign targeting EU residents in which we were doing a performance campaign. And that means our pixel had to be placed after the cookie consent. And it would only fire when a user would consent to being tracked. Out of that campaign, only 5% of users actually consented to the cookies, meaning we were only able to track 5% of people coming onto the page and signing up to the brand's newsletter. So it was very limiting for us as performance marketers to really kind of find users and attract through that entire experience. And as such, the campaign underperformed and we eventually had to shift to a different channel. So it really had a great or immediate impact. Next, Apple Safari, kind of the end of 2018, they launched a second version of ITV 2.0. This completely removed all third-party cookies. As such, some companies out there completely remove Safari browser as a targeting point of view and just focus on other browsers like Chrome. But then, of course, as one browser takes suit, the rest kind of follow. So then in 2019, we had Firefox, and then of course, the big announcement, Google Chrome announced that they would eliminate all cookies by 2022. And then this last year, we definitely saw that with the new election, even California, a specific state, took action, giving customers the right to inquire information about their own data. And then another huge announcement with Apple iOS 14. Really, they're again allowing users to opt into sharing their IDFA and mobile identifier. Really, with this one too, I have to pause and tell you, the iOS 14 is a bit alarming because what we have been seeing at AUDIENCEX is everyone out there with an iPhone, 50% of those iPhone users upgraded to iOS 14. Out of 50% of those upgraded users, only 34% actually opted in to allowing their cookie to be shared. So this is a very low number. And again, just goes to show customers and people do not want to be tracked. They do not want relevant ads. And then of course, the biggest news and kind of why we're joining today is that in 2022, the end of this year, Google will be completely eliminating all third-party cookies. And so what does this mean? And is this a big deal? Should we be worried? Yes, it is a big deal. I mean, Google Chrome has 62% of all users across devices. And by 2022, they're scraping all third-party cookies. So this will take into effect the following targeting strategies. Behavioral targeting. I'm sure you guys know, this is when we show an ad to a user based on their behavior across the different websites. However, behavioral targeting is a big umbrella, which encompasses way more targetings like interest-based targeting, finding users that are interested in rock bands versus metal bands. Another use case is in-market audiences. So behavioral targeting will allow us to know who's in market to buy an auto or who's in market to, let's say, buy a new iPhone. So this then gets removed. Also, affinity targeting. So we could currently identify people who have certain affinities to type of brands like Apple versus Samsung. So this all within the umbrella of behavioral targeting kind of goes away with the deprecation of the third-party cookie. Another thing, ad retargeting. So this is when we show an ad to a user across the web who has previously visited your website. This is really important, not just for advertisers, but for publishers themselves who want to bring back traffic to their site to fill in the ad inventory that they have. So if you're a marketer and you are looking to drive, let's say, test drives for a new make and model of your car, it's really important to capture a user who may have, started that process to sign up for a test drive, who then got distracted with an email or their family or from working from home. You want to be able to retarget that user and bring them back to your site at a different time. So unfortunately, with third-party cookies, this won't become possible in the future once it goes away. The next is frequency capping. So this is a great one. This limits the number of times an ad is shown to the same user in a given time period. And it's really important, especially for media efficiencies. An example of this is we might want to only show 5 ad impressions in a 24-hour period, let's say if we're doing a big burst or a big campaign over the weekend. Anything kind of above that just creates ad annoyance and ad fatigue for users. So without frequency capping, we're going to have to find other ways to limit the way we're showing ads to users on the internet, because we definitely don't want to bombard them. Another one, audience extension. So this is showing an ad to a publisher's audience across different websites. So it's very similar to lookalike marketing, where you find a specific group of audiences on your website, and you want to find similar groups to them across the internet. And then lastly, we have view through attribution. So a lot of advertisers here joining today, they might not worry about this so much because they might be on a last click or click only attribution model. But really, a view through attribution is really important because it gives marketers the complete full story of their media marketing mix and what's truly working and where they should invest their dollars based on performance. So without view through attribution, it's actually going to skew the way we see campaigns and their performance and how well they're doing. But that's okay, because there are solutions. Even if these are going away, we will talk about later what we could do once we remove behavioral targeting, what other things we could look at, such as contextual targeting. But these are things definitely you want to be thinking about. And if you are using some of these strategies, please reach out to us to kind of understand some kind of workarounds and what we could do instead. And then, of course, that's just an example of just basic completely affect the entire advertiser's stack. So really, we do more than just programmatic, as every marketer does. You will still be able to do things like verification, brand safety, paid search and paid social connected TV. You won't have to worry about those channels because they're less affected because they don't have cookies. And mobile attribution for the moment should be okay, but it totally depends on the iOS 14 update. But in terms of cookies, it's still fine. But really what's going to have a high impact is things like delivery and creative. So what we used to do with marketers like DCO or dynamic creative optimization, this is taking personalization and automating it. That is going to be much harder to do in the future. And then another one to call out is brand lift studies. So without third-party cookies, we won't be able to understand who was necessarily in a controlled versus exposed group, and then the impact that they had while seeing an ad. So brand lift studies are going to be harder to employ but there might be solutions in the future. So if you do run a lot of brand lift studies, you might want to think of other ways of measuring the effectiveness of your campaigns. And that could be things like sales or time on site of new users. So what does this mean overall for the internet? We wanted to share some key challenges with the loss of third-party cookies, right? As we've been talking a lot, there is going to be less personalized ads, but less targeted ads leads to a cost implication for publishers. And because now publishers can't monetize, users based on their behavior and et cetera, they're going to have to find other ways to monetize their traffic. One of the ways we've been seeing, and I'm sure you all have too, is the rise of paywalls. So rise of paywalls essentially means less content readily available for consumers. Consumers are going to have to pay a subscription or pay a fee to access content. And this really limits kind of accessibility to some customers that just can't afford some of these prices. And then again, as we're seeing too, we will then start to see more and more ad dollars shift to walled gardens who already have their own first-party cookies and logged-in user data. And this isn't necessarily just Facebook and Google. This includes things like retailers or publishers or, online streaming services like Netflix and Twitch. All of these partners will have their own walled garden first-party data logged in users that you could still access. But sadly, we might see this shift from kind of programmatic online advertising to kind of these walled gardens or walled retailers and publishers to access their data. So what does the future look like then? If this change is happening, what do we do? Well, if it's not a cookie, then what? Good news, we could still use first-party cookies. So again, we could use first-party data deployed server-side that could be activated through platforms on the DSP. So you'll still be able to use your DMP data because it starts with first-party data. So I would definitely think now about your analytics stack and make sure you have a plan in action for first-party cookies, and we'll learn more about specific steps you could take later on. We still already today have people-based IDs, which is great. We already have identifiers we could use today and continue to use in the future. Some examples of these are email addresses, loyalty IDs, or credit card numbers. So this data could still be uploaded in hash for data matching because these are people-based identifiers anyways for targeting. And then also across the industry, partners in agencies and marketers and platforms, they're all creating a new thing like development IDs. So really when cookies go away, there'll be a new innovation for new IDs. This could be a browser ID where everyone, if they want to access the internet, before they do so, they'll have to log in, let's say Google Chrome. Before you could search in Google, you may have to actually exchange and give your email address before you could access the internet. And there's also going to be consumer controlled IDs, which we'll learn about next. But before we jump into that, since Google is at the head of this and kind of deprecating third-party cookies, what are they going to do instead? So far today, they've announced that they'll be sharing a privacy sandbox. Quick note on the word sandbox. This just means a test environment, and it's a protected test environment. So please note that this name isn't set in stone. You might hear Google calling it something else in the future, but at the moment, it's going to be called a privacy sandbox because it's a privacy test. So Google going forward will still allow ad targeting, measurement, and fraud prevention to happen in this privacy sandbox, whereby the cookies are going to be replaced with a 5-application programming interface. And really what this is this creates an API in which advertisers can access this API from a call and a cost. This API will enable such use cases such as ad selection, conversion measurement, all without revealing individual private information about a user. So really, in short, in engineering terms, this is called a sandbox because it's a protected environment in a test environment. The one thing to note, though, is that Google will require a cost for this. So right now, they've kind of introduced this idea of a budget. So you could set up your own budget to kind of access this API call to get user data. But as soon as that budget runs out, you then won't be able to make any API calls. So we don't know too much more information about this and what this looks like for marketers if there's limited spends, but definitely stay tuned because throughout the year we'll be updating in kind of this webinar format or newsletters on kind of more information as Google releases it. Other than Google, there's other solutions out there that we wanted to share from some of our partners too. So Comscore has come up with predictive audiences. So really, this is awesome and really cool. And we've seen Fitbit actually be one of the first brand advertisers to test this. So the predictive audiences from Comscore is a cookie-free targeting capability that enables advertisers to reach audiences based on granular consumer behavior. So this is things like OTT consumption, automotive purchase data, and non-FCRA financial data. And this is all collected through privacy-friendly contextual signals. Next is LiveRamp's authentic traffic solution. So LiveRamp is actually partnering with authenticated publishers and matching that data back to their own LiveRamp identity link. The identity link is a deterministic graph of emails, postal addresses, and phone numbers in which we could identify and match back to publishers' data in real time. And then finally, the Trade Desk. They're also coming up with a unified 2.0 solution. So this will be an open source sign-on solution for the web, meaning users will have to provide their email addresses for the purpose of identification and accessing a network of opted-in publishers. So again, we're kind of moving away from this free open internet to where we'll have to log in to use and access it. But at least with that, we have a value in exchange of protecting our data and sharing with advertisers just a bit safer who we are. So knowing all of this, what do we do and what can we do today? One of the first things we recommend at AUDIENCEX for marketers or even publishers is to start with an audit. Really, you need to understand how greatly this is going to impact your business, and you won't know that until you understand what you've been currently doing. So we suggest you look at your current media setup and really understand how many impressions are actually going to behavioral targeting and third-party cookies. One brand, it was recently shared, Miller Coors, they said that 95% of their impressions were actually being served towards behavioral targeting, meaning only 5% were left for kind of, contextual placement or, other tactics. So definitely take a look at your current stack and really understand the great impact of how this is going to affect your business. The next step we suggest is really grow and have a plan in place to leverage first-party data. So look at the current data sets you have. Is that translatable through email addresses, through signups, through sales? How can we translate that into a DMP and match it to a DSP? If you aren't working with a DMP, definitely get in touch with us. We have a list of partners, and depending on your vertical and your KPIs, we could definitely recommend a great partner for you to use. And even with this year, I would definitely use this year for your current campaigns to grow that first party audience and that first party data. Run email marketing campaigns or sign up campaigns to capture data like, interest or, demographics of age and gender, or things like email addresses and phone numbers. So really have a plan for that, because that's going to be something you could use going forward. The third thing we want you to focus on is marketplace partnerships. This is huge. So without the use of kind of behavioral targeting, we're going to have to heavily rely on contextual, which means we're going to need to grow our direct publisher relationships, either through a formal partnership or through a PMP. And this is something at AUDIENCEX we're really trying to focus on this year. We want to grow our direct partnerships and set up some of the best PMP deals for our clients across many different verticals that are a right fit for them and their KPI. This also kind of relates to the next step, which is for understanding your audience contextually. Really, we want you to focus on and identifying key categories where your audience exists, and then build on those categories to create inclusion and exclusion lists. Because we're moving away from niche targeting, we can no longer run in a run a network environment. Running in run a network, it was safe back then because we layered things like behavioral targeting and third-party audiences and ad frequency and retargeting, etc. But without these safeguards in place, we really only be running in contextually relevant spots that really where our users exist, because that's going to be a safe blocker for kind of the ad fraud and the media wastage that exists. So definitely think of how we could be blocking bad performing publishers and then including great publishers that are actually where your audiences are, or publishers that we see a lot of conversions for your campaign. And then finally, we could still make use of cookieless signals. So we don't see this too much today, but do leverage probabilistic data like location and device modeled married with carrier data to build new targeting strategies. There is something to say about a Samsung Galaxy A80 user on T-Mobile versus an iPhone 12 AT&T customer. These are two completely different audiences with different interests. So make use of this data. How could you look at device and carrier and location to make kind of assumptions about household income or maybe about interests? So definitely still use these, and also use these to find out actually who your customers are. Are my customers more iPhone carrier or iPhone models, or are they more AT&T carriers? So we could still use this going forward, and it'll be really important. So in summary, the future is bright. Cookies were never a stable foundation. They represented devices, not people. And moving forward, there won't be a single universal standard that's going to replace the cookie. Tracking conversions will become harder, but it's also going to accelerate things like machine learning, especially for conversion tracking, which we're all excited about. And then in the long term, there's going to be a potential for universal IDs. So our biggest takeaway is that you marketers need to stay engaged and work with partners that could help you navigate through these evolving technology, because although we're in the beginning of 2020, we only have a year left before this takes into effect. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Danielle.
Of course.
We are going to open it up to questions. We've had quite a few come in already, and we can get to those. Before we jump into that, while you're typing, a little pitch on the next slide. Our next webinar coming up is February 3rd. We're going to be diving into many different programmatic targeting strategies, everything from behavioral to geo-targeting and more custom things that are only available on certain DSPs. So we'll be including the registration link for that along with the recording, which is one of the most frequently asked questions. Yes, we are going to send you the recording for this, hopefully this afternoon. So look out for that in your email. And if you don't get it, feel free to reach out to us and we will give it to you directly. All right, so jumping into some of these questions, we got quite a few at the beginning about Google specifically. So Google claims that they can target with 85% certainty. And how do we talk about programmatic over these Google campaigns? And just a lot of questions about Google and their own data in that walled garden. Do you have any thoughts on that in general?
Yeah, well, personally, I think Google has an awesome set of data. Don't forget, they're one of the largest search engines in the world. So they know what people want in real time based on the keywords and search behavior of users. It's unknown whether in-market audiences and search audiences will still be available in the future. But the data that they have, especially when it comes to search, is super irrelevant. Some of the old kind of sayings of marketing and contextual targeting that goes is, contextual targeting is great, it's relevant, but just because I see an ad in a contextually relevant placement doesn't necessarily mean I'm in market for that product, which is very, very key. And so the benefit of Google is that they actually have access to this data. So they know when I'm, about to have a baby, they know when I'm about to get married or buy a house or get a car. So they have a huge, rich set of data, which I think we'll still be able to access. It's just a bit unknown on the cost and how exactly we get access to that data. And I mean, Google, I wouldn't necessarily call them, they are in a way a walled garden, but they're also a great programmatic partner. So we use DV360, their DSP, a lot for a lot of our activations because of their rich data. But of course, there are some other partners out there that do have richer sets. You know, you can make the argument that the people-based intent kind of advertising and people-based marketing, which Facebook coined in 2014, that they kind of were the first pioneers of this. You know, they launched people-based marketing because they knew eventually cookies are going to disappear. So whether people-based or search-based is better for your campaign, it also comes down to your KPI, your brand, and what data sets are really going to activate kind of the user journey of getting users to your site to know more about your brand.
All right. Thank you very much.
Big question, very tough question.
Yeah, we have so many questions. We will probably not be able to get to all of them, but I am making a note of all of them. We will reach out to you directly if we don't answer your questions. So don't worry about it. All right. So back to when you were talking about remarketing and retargeting. If first-party cookies are not going away, why would remarketing or retargeting ads not be allowed to continue? Isn't that normally based on your own first-party data?
In a way, it is and it isn't. So usually to run a campaign with remarketing, you have a DSP pixel, not necessarily a brand pixel or a floodlight. And it depends on how you're capturing that data and whether it becomes first party or third party. And it all comes down to how it's being tracked. So let's say in the case I'm a marketer and I'm running ads on DV360 and I want to track people coming to the site. If I'm using a pixel from DV360 to track that user to then remarket them, that's third party. However, if I'm measuring that user coming onto my website through my GA, Google Analytics, and through floodlights, I could actually coin that floodlight ID, which is first party data because I own the analytics. And then I could translate that data into the DSP for remarketing. So it comes down to how we are actually capturing that data, which defines if it's first or third party. I hope that makes sense, but that's a great question.
Yeah, I think that clarifies it, but obviously let us know if not.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. Sorry, just trying to, which ones? Okay. Does the deprecation of third-party cookies have an impact on sponsored content in digital niche publications?
So sponsored content won't be affected because it's integrated, right? It's an integrated piece. Of course, it could totally depend on that content. Again, if it's video, sponsored video, and it comes up again through ad serving through specific audiences, of course that will be affected because that's still using third-party cookies. But let's say you have a full page takeover or a skin working with a specific partner or publisher, that won't be affected because it's sponsored, it's integrated, and you're less concerned about the audiences seeing the ad versus having that full takeover of like a sponsorship, etc. So no, those won't be impacted.
Alrighty. Let's talk about CPMs. With all this talk about PMPs and publisher direct, do you expect CPMs to rise, especially in verticals where competitors are all trying to secure inventory from the same premium publishers?
Absolutely.
And do you have any prediction as to percentage change in CPMs? I don't know if you can do that.
Ooh, that's a tough one. Predicting the future. If I get this right, I have to get the lotto ticket soon. Yep. So that's a great question. Yes. In short answer, yes. And another effect on that is just that inventory is actually just going to run out completely. So there won't be a CPM even high enough to buy because it'll just be completely sold out. So we actually started seeing this last quarter. You know, we've kind of been seeing this shift over to PMPs and direct publishers, especially with new entrants that are really exciting, like a Twitch. You know, a lot of these new publishers still have awesome publisher sales team, and less of their inventory is going to programmatic anyways. But with this effect of a cookieless world, yes, marketers are going to be running to publishers, setting up deals, setting up huge year-end deals and kind of upfronts with these publishers. So it does mean kind of less inventory available for some of the smaller advertisers, but not to worry because, if you want to be with one publisher, we could definitely help you find a similar publisher based on their audience. And that's what all of our effort is going into this year. We are really looking at our publisher list and P&P deals and where we could find a great mix of scalability and CPM pricing. So for those key publishers like a Financial Times or a BBC, of course, their CPMs are going to go through the roof, and potentially even things like walled gardens like Facebook and LinkedIn. However, it does open up access to other unique niche publishers that those marketers aren't going to, and will still be able to find efficiencies. If I have to guess a percentage, I would hope to see no more than 20%, 15%. But who knows? Again, in Q4, we were seeing rates increase by 34%. It was a lot. So hopefully no more than 20 is going to be my overall prediction. But we already saw in Q4 34% for some CTV publishers.
All right. Okay, I'm going to ask one more, and then the rest of them we will reach out to you directly to answer your questions. This has been amazing, and you guys have so many great questions. Thank you so much.
Yes.
So we talked about first and third party data. How does second party data come into play here? Will DSPs be able to combine and resell data from their publishers?
Great question. And yes, the second this announcement came, actually publishers were one of the first players to make use of their second party data. So they were looking at their first party data and how could we actually sell this to people like a LiveRamp and do customer matching with their own data segments. So this is how we're going to have an alternative, is the use of second party data. So publishers are going to be sharing those user logins, kind of those interests, those category interests, kind of user sessions with partners like a LiveRamp or Experian or even Comscore. And they're going to combine both their second party data to then be used as first party data for marketers. So that's exactly what we're seeing as the alternative IDs and kind of solutions for targeting. So yes.
All right. Okay, everybody. Thank you so much, Danielle. This has been so informative. The future is bright. Love that takeaway.
Right. Yeah, I can't wait to have my phone stop listening to me and getting to relevant ads. I'm excited. And, I think, our industry is one of the best industries to quickly adapt and learn new things. I guarantee at the end of 2022, we'll all be sitting back laughing, and not even think about this in the future. We'll just adapt.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, everybody, we're sending out the recording later today. If you have any other questions that you didn't already send over, hello@audiencex.com on the screen. That's our email address. It comes to me and I will make sure it gets answered. And we appreciate you taking time out of your day. Happy Inauguration Day.
Everyone.
Thanks, Danielle. Talk to you later.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.